So these are the 7Hz timeless, one of the few planar magnetic IEMs out there in the world. Well, aside from the LCD14, LCD-I20, LCD-I10s, and all those stuff. But generally, you wouldn't be getting a lot of planar magnetic IEMs, especially in the small form factor. Most of the IEMs that I just mentioned are fairly large, and the ones that are smaller, like the thin P1s, generally sound kind of horrendous. Now, the 7Hz timeless is pretty damn unique, and I would say pleasant to listen to. Now, we'll get further into that once we start talking about the sound, but first of all, we'll just start off with a disclaimer, and we'll run through the build quality later on as well. So, this unit was bought by Brian. He bought it with his own money. So we're not affiliated with any store, any brand whatsoever, so this review will be just completely of my own honest opinion. Now, just glancing through what you're going to be getting in your purchase package and what the build quality of the 7Hz is like, the timeless. The cable itself is pretty supple. I wouldn't say it's the most supple cable I've used, but it's quite pleasant to use. It's not too microphonic. It just moves about just enough. The chin slider works well. The jack, albeit normally I would be complaining because it's not an angle jack, because I feel that the 7Hz timeless can be driven from portable sources quite well enough, and it just has enough isolation to be used as a portable device. I would have preferred an angle jack, but this jack that is provided is of such high quality that I'm not gonna dock points from it like I would normally. Now, the IEMs themselves are a bit unique in terms of the design. I don't know why they had to make it round like this, because even for my like medium to large ears, this makes the fit sometimes be a bit difficult. I'm able to fit them quite comfortably in my ear, but sometimes I can feel the end of this tab here just scratching against my ear. So I imagine that if you had smaller ears, this would probably be a problem. So you might want to just try it out first, just in case, right? But on the inner side of it, it's just a normal like over ear type of shell. So yeah, and it fits quite comfortably otherwise, so no problems on that. The shell itself also isn't as heavy as it might look, albeit it is made out of like aluminium. It's not too heavy. It's nowhere near as heavy like let's say the Sony Z1Rs. Those are way heavier. These aren't as heavy as that, and it has some vents on the inside as well. And this filter actually you can replace, because they provide you with like a couple of filters or just these dust covers, I suppose. So yeah, in case that you need to replace them in the future if you have lots of gunk in your ear, for example. Now, the connection itself is an MMCX connection. It's pretty solid. I don't know why both of the indicators of them are red. Normally you would go red and blue. It's probably a design choice, but I think it's it's a pretty odd design choice, I would say. Now, aside from the IEM themselves, you will be getting this very nice case. It's CNC'd out of aluminium, from what I can feel. I don't know if it's actually aluminium or not. It feels like aluminium. Feels pretty similar to my keyboard. That's what I can tell. And when you close this case, it sounds magnificent. It just, oh yeah, it's a very great sound. I don't think this will be very practical at all to use, because putting this into your bag would just scratch everything in your bag, and in itself, it's probably just more like a desk ornament sort of thing. But even then, had they just gone with a regular case, if this would have reduced the price significantly, because I think this would probably cost in itself like $25 probably, I would estimate. I would have preferred that, but that now that they've included it, well, it feels very well made. Aside from this case, you will not be getting a lot of other accessories. Actually, you will only be getting like 7 pairs of ear tips. These are sort of like the AET clones from Acoustune. I don't know if they're original or not. It doesn't actually say on the box from where this is. I think it looks like a clone that they made up. These are some ear tips with just flat heads. Looks more flat right? I couldn't get a proper fit with these, and these ear tips, which are more like regular shaped, I was able to get a proper fit with these ear tips as well. As for this review, I will be actually using these ear tips, which are a third-party ear tip, so they're from Marunana. So, and I feel like they are the most comfortable and just the best balance in terms of like comfort to sound that I was able to get. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about the sound. And these are the filters I mentioned earlier. I forgot. This also comes in your package. You only get a pair of these filters though, so keep that in mind. We've seen reports on Headfi that people broke these filters when they were switching ear tips, when ear tips rolling. So you just want to be a bit cautious because they are indeed pretty damn thin. Now, let's just get straight into sound because that's probably what you're here for. The 7Hz Timeless, all in all, is a very solid IEM. It's a very just warm, relaxing sounding IEM, and I really like it. Even at my first listen, I liked it a lot, and we're gonna be talking about it starting from the bass like we usually do. So the bass of the 7Hz Timeless is quite emphasized. There is quite a lot of bass. There's more sub bass than there is mid bass. The sub bass also extends very deep. It's actually, I'm very impressed with how deep it can go. The sub bass slam is very pleasant. It has very nice texture for sub bass, and it's also very well controlled overall. The mid bass also has very nice kick and punch, which, albeit it being a planar magnetic IEM, the kick and the punch of the mid bass feels more like of a dynamic driver than it does a planar. Maybe because it's quite a bit smaller than normally like I would have on planar headphones, for example. That might be it, but I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's a good thing, because normally my critique with planar headphones is that they do not deliver kick in a way that dynamic drivers do, and as such they can sometimes feel like they're just a little bit not blunted, but they just feel like it's a bit held back for some reason. It's like there's like some sort of wall stopping this kick to be delivered properly. But that's not the case with the Timeless. And overall, the bass of the Timeless, it's more on like a medium sort of speed. But I really like the bass of this 7Hz Timeless. I think it's probably one of the best, if not the best, in its price range. Speaking of which, the bass is also, because it's how well it's controlled, the mid-range doesn't get affected much at all, and the mid-range itself is also very thick. There's lots of low mids in here, so if you listen to a lot of male vocals and such, they'll sound very thick. If you don't like that, then you might want to just veer away from the Timeless, but overall I think it's a I like this presentation, especially when you're listening to more relaxed songs. And albeit it being quite thick, the upper mids are also a bit emphasized. There's a little bit of rise in the upper mid region of the 7Hz Timeless. So when you listen to violins or like female vocals, sometimes they can get a bit aggressive, but not much at all. For someone like me who's quite sensitive to upper mids, this wasn't a problem at all. But just keep in mind, since that you're super sensitive to upper mid region, for example. And the mid-range, the separation was, I think, quite good. Detail retrieval was just okay, I would say. It's nothing exceptional. I think it's quite acceptable for this price range, though. So yeah. I also forgot to mention that I actually really liked guitars on the 7Hz Timeless for some reason, especially bass guitars. I think sounded very nice on these. So yeah. Now when we talk about the treble of the 7Hz Timeless, this is probably where it starts falling apart a little bit, because the treble on the 7Hz Timeless is quite muted. It's not to the point where I would say that it sounds overly dark. I think this is still a very acceptable treble representation. It's just that cymbals especially sound like they're just a little bit muffled. It's like they're covered with like paper, kind of. They don't really have this energy to them as you would on like other IEMs. But that is kind of beneficial in case that you want to listen to more relaxed songs, or if you want to use these for long listening sessions essentially. Because the 7Hz timeless, just aside from being muted, also doesn't have very great treble extension. It just starts falling off after 10,000. But before that, actually on the 8K-ish region, there's a bit of a peak, so that can sometimes be annoying. But even for me, who's quite sensitive to this region, I didn't really find it to be much of a problem. So yeah, if you're finding any annoyance in the treble, that might be it. But the rest of it is just, it's quite a bit further behind compared to the mids and the bass. It's a bit muted in terms of treble. So yeah. Now, when we talk about Soundstage, this is probably where this is the worst part of the 7Hz timeless, I would say, and it's probably what is preventing it to be a truly great IEM. Don't get me wrong, it's a great IEM, but the Soundstage on this, if this were my head, for example, it just lacks depth. It feels like the depth of the 7Hz timeless was just this much. Doesn't really feel like it has much depth at all. The width also isn't really anything special, but it's still quite acceptable. But not only does it not lack quite a bit of depth, the imaging on the 7Hz timeless wasn't really exceptional. I was only able to get an accuracy of like 55-ish degrees, 55, 60 sometimes degrees. So maybe that's a problem to fit or something, I'm not sure. Take into account that when talking about soundstage and imaging, as per usual, take it with a huge grain of salt, because our perception of soundstage and imaging differs greatly, and especially once I compared notes with other reviewers, usually my perception of soundstage and imaging is quite different compared to theirs. So yeah, keep that in mind. Now, in terms of comparison, which is the last section which we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be comparing it directly to the Thin P1s, and I'm going to be comparing it to just some other IEMs in its value range. I'm comparing it to the Thin P1s simply because it's one of the most requested comparisons, and it's because it's also somewhat in the price range and also technologically similar. If I were to compare these to the LCD i20s or the i30s, i10s, I don't think that'll be very fair. I mean the Sine i20, Sine i10s and i20s. So yeah, I'll just be comparing these to the Thin P1s mainly. Now, comparing this to the Thin P1s, the Thin P1s sound, the Thin P1s has way less bass than the timeless do, which is kind of odd because it's a planar magnetic driver. Normally you would expect there to be quite a bit of bass, or at least the bass quality would be quite a bit better, but on the Thin P1s it has significantly less bass. There's not a lot of texture in it, extension also isn't the best, and there's just very little slam and kick in the bass on the Thin P1s. The mid-range on the Thin P1s sound rich, slightly thinner compared to the timeless, but it does have better separation and detail than the timeless do. Overall, I think the Thin P1's mid-range also sound a little bit cleaner compared to the timeless. So yeah, that's one other thing. In terms of treble, the Thin P1's treble can be very aggressive together with the upper mids. It can be very brutal actually, and compared to the timeless has way less aggressive treble. It's kind of muted, and it also just presents treble way better than the Thin P1s do. The Thin P1s just has this treble which tries to murder you, and especially in the air region there's huge emphasis on the Thin P1s, which for if you still have the sensitivity in that region, or even remotely, right, in like 18K or something, this will annoy you, definitely, I would say. So yeah, I think overall, if you're looking for just pure technical performance, I think the TNP1s might be the better choice. But if you're looking for something that's a lot more pleasing to listen to, and I would say personally it's a way better choice, I think the Timeless would be the option for you. Now, in this price range, I'm gonna be comparing these to stuff like the Tangim Oxygen and the C Audio Bravery. Now, compared to the Oxygens, they use completely different drivers. The Oxygens, I feel, are a bit more aggressive in the upper mids region compared to the Timeless, ever so slightly. The Oxygens will also have less bass compared to the Timeless. The mid-range on the Oxygen overall sounds quite a bit cleaner. In terms of detail retrieval and separation, I would say they're on equal footing. The Oxygen might feel a bit cleaner compared to the Timeless at times. And the treble of the Oxygen is a lot more emphasized compared to the Timeless. I think they're still equally as smooth, albeit the Oxygen might be a bit more aggressive at times. Extension of the treble of the Tangim Oxygens is just way better as well, so keep that in mind. I would say overall, if you're looking for a more like all-rounder IEM which can do well in all genres, I think the Oxygen might be a better choice. If you're looking for a more relaxed presentation, I think the Timeless will be a lot safer. Now, comparing these to something like the C Audio Bravery, I think the Bravery just gets slaughtered in terms of bass and mid-range. I think the bass of the Timeless has just way better texture. It just slams and kicks way better compared to the Braveries. The mid-range sounds, I think, a bit more pleasant on the Timeless. They sound thicker on Timeless, but the Bravery has a more cleaner presentation. I think in terms of like detail retrieval, I think they're around about the same. The Bravery might take it just slightly better, but not by much. Separation, I feel they're on equal footing. In terms of treble, the C Audio Bravery has better extension. It also does have this, I think, less muted sound overall. I think the Bravery just presents treble better than the Timeless do, and especially soundstage and imaging. Let's not even get to that, because the Timeless will definitely lose. The C Audio Bravery just does way better in terms of soundstage and imaging. So yeah. So I think that's about it about the 7Hz Timeless. I think the 7Hz Timeless are a definitely worthy pickup in this price range. I think they're going for now like only at $200 if you buy from AliExpress and such. In Indonesia, funny enough, it's actually quite a bit more expensive. These are like more than $250 here in Indonesia. So yeah, if you can't get them for $200, I think they're a very worthy IEM, and especially for planars, it's one of the best, if not the best planar IEM that I've heard till date. It also doesn't require a huge ass amp like the TNP1s and TNP2s does, so why are you not buying this? I don't know. So yeah, I think that's about it, and I'll see you guys next time.